Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Buckeye Weekly Podcast. I am Tony Gerdeman here, as always, with Tom Orr. Tom, how's it going?
My voice is in its normal octave and register, so I guess I'm doing fine. I feel like I need to ask how you're doing.
I'm good. Why are you asking? No, sorry for that introduction, Tom. I didn't mean to confuse you. But yes, I'm doing fine. Tom is doing fine. It is time to we talked about this is our regular Michigan Monday edition of the Buckeye Weekly Podcast, and Michigan was off this week, just as Ohio State was. So we thought we would revisit our tale of the tape from before the season and see if it's still stacking up the way it was back then. And by tale of the tape, I mean back in July or August, we went through each position group, Ohio State, Michigan, and tale of the tape. Who's better who's better quarterback, who's better running back, who's better receivers, who's better at linebacker, et cetera, et cetera. And so now, after a little bit more information, 6 games more of information, we know a lot more than we did. We'll see how, I guess, maybe discuss a little bit how right we were, what changes, and most importantly, where are we siding now? So let's just get to it. We'll go position by position, not run through this, but jog a little bit and just see where things stand now. Whose side are you taking? Do you want the Ohio State quarterbacks? Do you want the Michigan quarterbacks? And Tom, let's start there. I'll let you go first.
Well, this is one where I think this is kind of representative of the overall conversation that we're going to have, which is Michigan has been a much better team this year and has had much better results this year than we expected over the summer. Now, part of that is we thought Washington was going to be a top 20 team. Turns out Washington's 2-4. We thought Wisconsin was going to look like Wisconsin. Turns out they look like poor man's Minnesota. Like some of the wins have not, and I'm not 100% bought in on Michigan yet, as we'll get into probably later on the show. But 6-0 is 6-0. So they have had a better. There were probably shows where we talked about the fact that there were scenarios where Michigan just won 6 games this year. They've won 6. They're going to beat Northwestern this week, so that's 7. So they're already doing pretty well. But the quarterback position is kind of one of those spots. Cade McNamara has been better than I thought he was going to be. I thought he was going to be average-ish, maybe a little below, just kind of like a little bit of a game manager. And he's been better than average. I saw at CFB Numbers on Twitter put out a graph this week where, just rating QBs and like where they are in ESPN's QB rating and also EPA per play, expected points added per play. And Cade McNamara is slightly positive in both of those two. He's in the upper right-hand quadrant of the graph, which is you're good in both of those. So not great. He's just he's a little bit above average in both of those. That's great. Tony, you want to guess who's in the absolute literal upper right-hand corner of that graph, who's literally the best in both of those categories?
Is it Ohio State redshirt freshman quarterback CJ Stroud?
Tony, you will not believe it, but you have guessed correctly. Yes, in fact, it is CJ Stroud, because CJ Stroud's been maybe one of the best quarterbacks in all of college football. And, that includes sort of a little bit of a slow start. He has looked even better since the shoulder. He had that week off to rest the shoulder. So this is one of these spots where it's Michigan is better than we thought they were, but they are a million miles behind Ohio State right now. And I don't think any serious person is going to argue that.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. Cade McNamara, number 8 in the Big Ten in pass efficiency. CJ Stroud, number 1 by a mile. CJ Stroud is throwing for double the amount of yards per game as Cade McNamara, plus 11. So, in every measurable you want to throw out there, it's Ohio State. I was pretty wrong in my preseason assessment, although it can still happen, where I said, Michigan will start 3 quarterbacks this year. We have not seen really hiding our hair of Alan Bowman has played very little. I expected him to play. I don't know if I expected him to play by game 6, but I did expect him to play and start at some point this season because of injury or benching to Cade McNamara and an eventual injury to JJ McCarthy, because that's how these things play out. But Cade McNamara, to his credit, has started every game. He's been there, and that's about the best thing you can say about him. And if you're going to get the check mark in this category, you need something more than that. And CJ Stroud has everything more than that and more. So I don't know if we need to explore it anymore, Tom.
No, I think if people have watched these two teams, like, yep, there's one of these offenses that looks like maybe the best offense in the country or close to it. And there's one of these offenses that hung 20 whole points on Rutgers. Like, Ohio State has not played Nebraska yet, but the one common data point we have is Michigan got Rutgers at home and scored 20 points, and Ohio State had to go on the road to Rutgers, and it looked like every other Ohio State Rutgers game, which is like, oh, that was not 20-13. That was, in fact, not even close to 20-13. So, yeah, we'll have more common data points later, but right now, all of the data points say, yep, Ohio State.
So let's move to the running backs, where Ohio State they've started a couple of different guys this year. We know Michigan has been consistent. Well, they started out consistent. The running game has declined from the start of the season. They are still leading the Big Ten at 246.5 yards rushing per game. Ohio State third at 210.5. But when you look at how Michigan has gone about that, they made their hay early in the season. They've been coming back down to earth. Blake Corum is number 4 in the Big Ten in rushing. Hassan Haskins is number 8, which is great. Good for those guys. But they've both had multiple games where they've been contained. So far this season, or maybe I think the only people who have contained Travion Henderson at this point has been Ryan Day and Tony Alford. And, Oregon held him to 12 for 54, but that's about as good as you can hope for. And since then, I think everybody understands that Ohio State is different. And Travion Henderson has been starting from after that game and has, been in the 4 games he started, 11.5 yards per carry, 11.6 yards per carry, 8.9 yards per carry, 6.4 yards per carry. So, he has been just getting better and better. And right now, Tom, it's hard for me. As good as Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins have played at times, I'm not taking anybody over Travion Henderson. And Master Teague has played well. And yeah, they don't have that 1-2 that Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum have been able to have at times. But also, Hassan Haskins and Blake Corum have not had that 1-2 a couple of times this year. So I'm siding with Travion Henderson here and Master Teague and whatever else happens. Mayan Williams should be back this coming week. So I'm going with Ohio State there. Am I off base at all?
To me, this is like run back the Cade McNamara conversation, and we're going to have it again, which is Blake Corum has been far better than we expected him to be. I think Blake Corum averaged 3 yards flat last year, and Hassan Haskins has basically been Hassan Haskins again, and Hassan Haskins is a very good Big Ten back. Blake Corum has been explosive at times. He's looked like you sort of heard Blake Corum was going to look like, and he just never did last year. That a lot of that probably is the offensive line's a lot better, and we'll get to them in a little bit, but that's great. Travion Henderson is Travion Henderson. 69 carries, 605 yards, 8.8 yards per carry, 9 touchdowns. Yep, okay. He's only started a few games. He's had 8 carries in a bunch of games, and he's averaging 100 yards a game. Nope. And Michigan fans who are probably upset about this right now, would you trade Blake Corum and Hassan Haskins for Travion Henderson? And at what point in that sentence did you already interrupt me to say yes? Because I have a feeling it was probably right around would you? And you went, I know what he's going to say, and yes, do it now. Yes.
Bye.
Yeah, bye. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, this is Ohio. These are two teams that I think are better at the running back position than we were expecting during the start of the season. Ohio State is still ahead. I think that's not, if Travion Henderson is healthy, this is not even really a serious conversation.
Yeah, and even Master Teague averaging 5.7 yards per carry. That's nearly a yard better than Hassan Haskins' 4.9. 4.9 is not good. He needs to do better. He's not a home run hitter, but he should be more consistent than that or more productive. So I think we agree now. Do we need to rank fullbacks? Because if we want, you can throw Mitch Rossi in there, and I think Ohio State still takes that one. But so we're going to go ahead and jot down Ohio State on the running backs. Ooh, we've got a good one up next time. I don't know how this one's going to go, but I'll let you talk about it, and then I won't need to because you probably be emphatic enough and detailed enough to explain to us who gets the check mark for the receivers and tight ends. Is it Michigan with Eric All, or is it Ohio State with everybody else?
I mean, Cornelius Johnson has been pretty decent this year. Like, it's been good. Eric All's been fine. I mean, like, the receivers are fine. Mike Sainer still's made some big plays. And the other side has Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave and Jackson Smith-Njigba. So, like, if Ronnie Bell was healthy, if Ronnie Bell hadn't gotten hurt in the first game of the year, like, sure, like, there's a conversation as to whether he might start at Ohio State, maybe, but he got hurt. And then there's really, like, who else in that conversation is, who at Michigan is even in the conversation to start at Ohio State? Like, even in the conversation to play over, I mean, maybe someone there is the fourth receiver. Maybe Cornelius Johnson's the fourth receiver at Ohio State. Maybe if Julian Fleming's hurt and Emeka Egbuka's still not completely ready.
But how much are you rotating if he is?
Right. Exactly. More. Yeah. And Ohio State could very easily have 3,000-yard receivers this year. I mean, it's just, this is one of these where it's like, we could keep talking, but you all know, like, this is an easy one.
Cornelius Johnson leading Michigan with 14 receptions. He is 41st in the Big Ten this year in receptions. So 41st. Ohio State has, 3 in the top 17. That's fine. It is what it is. And so, yes, thus ends the wide receiver and tight ends debate, because it's not nice to be bullies. Let's talk about this offensive line, Tom, which Ohio State has, 8 guys that could start. Michigan has, 8 guys that they could turn to, but wouldn't necessarily want to, and they would put in a time of emergency. But when you've got Matt Jones on the bench and can come in and play and be one of the top-rated guards in the nation, and you've got so many tackles that your 5-star Paris Johnson has to play guard, and your preseason All-American Thayer Munford has to play guard because you want to get all of these guys in there. This is almost as easy as receivers for me, because there's just so the collective is as good as the individuals, and it's like these are all good guys, and yet you can piece them together and they still play well. Can they play better? Sure, they will. I mean, they're 6 games in, and they are still shuffling as guys get injured, and they want to play other guys. So I think they will get better. I think they're already better than Michigan. And again, Michigan's offensive line has done some really good things. They protect their quarterbacks. They, as I said, they were leading the Big Ten in rushing. I think if I look right now and see what that is in Big Ten games only, we will find, Tom, that Michigan is not leading the Big Ten in rushing in conference games. In fact, they are 6th, and Ohio State is 3rd. So there is another data point for you. Michigan rushing for 142.7 yards in conference games, nearly 100 yards more just on average, which tells you how, I don't want to say fake those initial stats were, but I don't think they were real.
Well, I don't want to be presumptuous, so I'm going to just let the listeners decide where the non-conference schedule ends and where the conference schedule begins for Michigan as I read down their list of rushing yards per game. Ready? 335, 343, 373, 109, 112, 204. And it's like Nebraska, 204. It's like basically 5 yards a carry. At Wisconsin, 44 carries for 112 yards. That's like 2.5 yards per carry. Rutgers, 37 rushes, 109 yards. I mean, Ohio State fans just saw Rutgers. Like, the Rutgers defense is like, I mean, whatever, it's fine. But the Rutgers, did you once watch that game and think, I bet this Rutgers defense, if they really focused on one element of stopping the Ohio State, attack, I bet they could do that. And just even if that meant allowing a lot of others, like, no. And Michigan only had 9 receptions for 163 yards in that game. Like, it was 9 for 16, 163 yards, no touchdowns. It's just, they are, I mean, we talked about, Cincinnati on the morning show for Tuesday, in the playoff rankings, how they start real high and then they're just going to sort of slowly slide down. Like that's what Michigan's going to do in the Big Ten, in the like rushing totals, like 335 yards, 343 yards, 373 yards. And then that number is just going to just keep sliding down every week. That number is going to get a little bit lower. Yeah. The line is, to me, better than I expected, because last year it was a disaster, but they lost both tackles last year. So it was like sort of understandable that it was a disaster. So they've been much better than that. But like, is it an average Big Ten line? Like it's substantially better than it was last year, but it's, slightly above average Big Ten line. I mean, Wisconsin's line looks terrible. Penn State's line looks terrible. Like it feels like Ohio State has the best line in the Big Ten, right? So this probably isn't much of a conversation.
No, indeed, it is not. A much better conversation, surprisingly, comes from the defensive line, because this is one where we said in the preseason it's clearly Ohio State, and the Michigan defensive line is never as deep as it needs to be. And that always gets found out towards the end of the season and also in the fourth quarter of games. And it will no doubt be the case again. Now, Mike McDonald brings in a new defense where they play a different kind of defensive line. Sometimes there's 2 guys, sometimes there's 5 guys. I like David Ojabo is listed as a linebacker, but he plays on the defense. He plays on the end. He plays on the edge, plays on the line. So I'm calling him part of the defensive line here as we try to help Michigan maybe win one. But although then maybe are we taking one away from the linebackers? But if you play on the line, for our purposes here, if you play on the line of scrimmage, you are a defensive lineman. And so I am putting him on a defensive line here. And when you look at what Michigan has, obviously Aiden Hutchinson is better than anything Ohio State has at defensive end. That is clear. That has been proven out. And there's no argument for that. Ohio State has nobody who has done what he has done on the defensive line. I think he has 5.5 sacks this year, and obviously more tackles for loss than that. And David Ojabo has 4.5 sacks. Those two have 10 of their 14 sacks on the year. So, good on you for the defensive ends. I think Ohio State has the middle. You look at their run defense numbers. Michigan is number 7 in the Big Ten in terms of yards per carry at 3.48, yards per rush allowed 3.48. Ohio State is 3.53. Very close there. They're right behind each other there. Ohio State has more sacks from the defensive line than Michigan does. So this one, I think you can. I don't know if this is a push. I just think Aiden Hutchinson, David Ojabo are creating enough havoc, but you're also getting pushed from the middle of the Ohio State defensive tackles. I think the interior at Ohio State is better. The exterior at Michigan has been more productive. So at this point, I'm thinking push. But as we've discussed in the preseason edition of this, whenever we push, Ohio State just ends up being better anyway. So why do we go through this exercise of pushing? I don't know, Tom. What are you thinking?
Well, I think you've got it right where the interior of the Ohio State defensive line is much better than the interior of the Michigan defensive line. I think I don't think anyone's going to argue that. And I'm fine with calling this a push if we want to, because Aiden Hutchinson, if we're including David Ojabo here, then, I think I was going to include him with the linebackers and then, have a pretty significant discussion about which linebacker unit was better. Cause I think Ojabo really, wherever he is, he helps, because he's been a revelation this year. He's been fantastic. 4.5 sacks halfway through the season. Like if you're putting up a 9-10 sack season, like, yeah, that's a big time season. Aiden Hutchinson on track for like 11 sacks this year.
Well, so, let me stop you then. If we just go ahead and move him to linebacker, this is Ohio State.
Well, if you move him to linebacker, it's Ohio State. I mean, I think you're at least pushing one of these two, and it's like you put them wherever you want to, and you call whichever one of those you want to a push. I think the interesting piece of this is, Aiden Hutchinson has had a great year. David Ojabo has had a great year. Tyreek Smith has missed a whole bunch of time for Ohio State. Zach Harrison has missed a little bit of time for Ohio State. Mm-hmm. Tyler Friday's out for the year for Ohio State. You're seeing JT Tuimoloau, you're seeing Jack Sawyer slowly start to emerge. Those guys are only going to get better throughout the course of the year. Presumably Tyreek Smith is coming back at some point. Zach Harrison has been back, but he had that one strip sack against Minnesota, and that's been a lot of his contribution this year. It's like You need all of these things to go wrong for Ohio State, and you need to slide David Ojabo in with the defensive line, and it's like, and now it's a push. Like, yeah, I mean, this goes back to, I think, our central point, which is the depth that Ohio State has. Like Michigan has good players. Ohio State has good depth. Like that's or Michigan, maybe let's rephrase that. Michigan has great players. Ohio State has great depth. Like there's just Aiden Hutchinson is great. Aiden Hutchinson is probably the best defensive end on either of these teams this year. I don't think anyone's really going to argue that. But then if you put David Ojabo with the linebackers, like how many more Ohio State defensive ends do you go through before you get to the second Michigan defensive end? And the answer is more than one. Like that's where you sort of run into issues. So yeah, I'm perfectly fine with call Ojabo a defensive end. We'll call this a push. But again, would Michigan trade their defensive line for Ohio State's defensive line for the opportunity to have Tuimoloau, Sawyer, Tyleik Williams, Haskell Garrett? Like, it feels like they probably would.
Yeah, and is it a matter of if it's a push, if Ohio State is even, are they leaving? Like, that's kind of how these things work out. Like, if they're even, then they're really not. And if Ohio State's interior is more, and I hate using this in English, more better than Michigan's interior.
That's not English.
No, and that's why I don't like using it. But like, if Ohio State's interior is so much better than Michigan's, and Michigan's exterior is only a little bit better than Ohio State's, doesn't that mean Ohio State's defensive line in total is better? Like, the gap between the tackles is a lot larger than the gap between the defensive ends.
Yeah, I think that's accurate.
So Ohio State?
I think we're grading in a curve. We're going to call this a push.
Or do we just want to move Ojabo to linebacker?
Yeah,
and talk about that.
That's fine. Let's move him to linebacker and see if that changes the calculus at linebacker. Because the linebacker conversation now for Ohio State is very, very different than the linebacker conversation would have been a month ago at Ohio State. You've had a couple of those fourth year guys transfer. Dallas Gant and Kayvon Pope are out. You've had the emergence of Cody Simon as he's kind of been coming back from an injury. You've had them sort of, Taraja Mitchell has been, solid. He's been solid, but unspectacular, maybe. You've had Tommy Eichenberg go from liability to solid contributor. And you've had Steel Chambers come sting out of the rafters. Like, what, where is he coming? What? Ooh, Steel Chambers? What? And just turn into this, fantastic linebacker where, a lot like the true freshman where you would, they're going to improve a lot just because they haven't really been doing this very long. And you're going to have that learning curve get pretty steep. That feels like what you're going to see with Steel Chambers. Like, Steel Chambers is already turning into an impact player just based on instinct, based on athleticism, as he starts to figure out that linebacker position, because he only moved over the summer. He played running back his first couple of years at Ohio State. So as he sort of figures that position out, he's only going to get better. So there's not a ton of depth there for Ohio State, but the linebacker position there now is very, very different than it was, a month or so ago.
Well, we've seen Michigan increase their depth at linebacker. I think we saw Jalen Harrell get some starts, but he only has 5 tackles on the season. Junior Colson has been a backup, and he's been playing a little, but Ohio State's 4 linebackers, their rotation, they rotate 2 at each position, as everybody knows. They are those 4 are in the top 6 of the tacklers on Ohio State in numbers. Michigan's top 4 linebackers, you've got Josh Ross, number 1, Nikai Hill-Green, number 3, and then you've got to go down to the backup Junior Colson, who's number 7 tackler, and then David Ojabo, number 11 tackler with 16 tackles on the season. So Ohio State's linebackers are more productive, and they are falling into place right now. And I shouldn't say falling into place. They're stepping into place because the defense has been much better. Is it the opponent? Some of it, sure. But the rotation is working. It's looking better. Guys are more comfortable. But I also think you're seeing some of the same stuff with Michigan, where their linebackers are, now like Nikai Hill-Green. This is his first extensive action. He's doing well. Josh Ross has been starting forever, and they have their ups and downs. They're not great in coverage, and maybe that will get better. Maybe it won't. The depth is, they're trying to make it better, and maybe by the end it will be as deep as Ohio State's, or maybe even a little deeper. But Ohio State has 6 scholarship linebackers at this point, throwing in Reed Carrico in there and Palaia Naoteote. So they're not the deepest group either. But, even with Ojabo in there, it's like where Ohio State has got a solid 4. Michigan has solid 3-ish, right? Am I wrong?
No, you're not wrong. I mean, and there's productivity there that you're not necessary. I mean, like Ross with 40 tackles, like that's a good season, and Ojabo with 4.5 sacks, like that's a tremendous amount of productivity out of that spot. But I think to me, wherever you put Ojabo here, I'll say, yeah, you could call that a push. This is when you put him on linebacker. You put these linebackers in the Ohio State defense. I don't think it materially changes. I don't think the linebacker play gets materially worse if it's these guys instead of the Ohio State guys on the Ohio State defense. So, you want to call this a push, that's fine. You want to call the line a push and slide Ojabo down to the line instead, that's fine. But I think I think Ohio State's probably going 1-0-1 here. However you want to divide that up.
Yeah, we can call this a push because even if you're like, we do the whole thing like, would Michigan trade their linebackers for Ohio State's? I don't know that they would, that sort of thing. Like it's not as cut and dry as it would be on the defensive line, even if Ojabo is there. So we will do Michigan a solid here. We will say, good effort. You get a push. And now to the group.
I like the fact that your charity here extends just to you didn't lose once.
Yes, congratulations. That's new.
They didn't lose to Ohio State last year.
Tom, too soon. Too soon. Way to bring everybody down. But that's what this show is for. Let's move to the secondary, which has brought a lot of Ohio State and Michigan did not play each other last year, but the fans of both teams watching their respective secondaries, I'm sure it felt like they were intertwined in some way because there's plenty of struggling and boy, that defense looks kind of like this defense. And they weren't on the same field, but sometimes they looked very similar in terms of how many touchdowns they gave up and how many big plays they gave up through the air. But now this year, I think there is, there's improvement at Ohio State for sure. And the adjustments have taken some time, but now I think things are complete and you're seeing a defense that knows what it's doing, a defense that should be doing what it's doing as opposed to, or it's being asked to do what it can do, as opposed to being asked to do what it didn't suit it. And they've also gotten more experienced. And so you've got all of these adjustments and these you're learning and it's all coming together for Ohio State. Michigan's secondary, as we said in the preseason, Daxton Hill is their best guy and he can play anywhere. He can come start at Ohio State tomorrow and Ohio State would be a better defense for having him. But then you look at the other guys. Brad Hawkins, their starting safety, fine. They have also started another safety. Tom,
was it R.J. Moten?
Yeah, R.J. Moten, who has, he hasn't really done anything this year in terms of positive. Hasn't made really any plays. Daxton Hill's been their nickelback, their number 5 guy who starts, plays the slot, plays it well, does whatever he's asked to do. And then Vincent Gray and Jamon Green are their starting corners again. And while those two guys are playing better, they haven't really been tested by anybody. They've played no significant passing offense. So even if they're better, I don't see them being better than Ohio State's corners who have fluctuated all season long, except for the one consistent guy in Denzel Burke, who I'm taking over either of those guys. And then whichever corner of the week from Ohio State is actually healthy, I'll take that guy and I'll take those two over Michigan's corners.
Yeah, this is one where you almost feel like you have to grade Michigan incomplete because they have not given up a 300-yard passing game yet this year, which is like, okay, that's good. They gave up 293 to Washington, and there were a lot of empty calories there for Washington. That was a lot of moving the ball between the 20s and not actually scoring. but 291 yards to Nebraska, 3 passing touchdowns to Nebraska. Was like, okay, that's not great. That's a lot of passing touchdowns. Give it to Nebraska because Nebraska's passing offense is not super fantastic. Ohio State has had the one blow up day where they gave up 428 passing yards to Tulsa. Other than that, they've been pretty fine all year, and they've been playing with big leads. So you would think that would, you had the last 2 weeks, Rutgers and Maryland threw 40 times and 39 times, and neither of them got to 300 yards. Like that's pretty good. But Rutgers is famously Rutgers, and Maryland was getting their heads caved in. So I think I'm with you. Like, I mean, you look at the personnel, and it's like there is no one on Michigan's team who is in the same stratosphere as Denzel Burke right now. So to me, like you could sort of start making a statistical case, but I think a lot of it is based on the fact that they haven't played anyone yet. Like when these teams play, like you feel like there's going to be the moment for Michigan, because I don't know how many great passing offenses they're really playing before then. Like it'll be interesting to see what Michigan State does against them, but Michigan State's not fantastic. Ohio State is the best passing offense in the Big Ten by a wide margin. So Michigan might get all the way to Thanksgiving weekend, not, still going, yeah, maybe. Like, I don't know if I believe in these guys, but no one's thrown on us yet. Like, well, you might, that might get you all the way to Thanksgiving, and then Ohio State comes to town, and then someone's throwing on you. That's just sort of how this feels like it's shaping up to me.
Especially if they contain Maryland and they're like, we can stop Maryland. We can stop anybody. I'm just looking here. Ohio State defense has faced 54 more passes than Michigan this year. Michigan has allowed more completions of 20 yards than Ohio State has. Michigan has allowed 17 to Ohio State's 16. So even though Ohio State has faced, many more passes than Michigan is still giving up bigger plays, and they're playing lesser passing offenses, basically. So I think there's a lot to see there that is like, well, I don't know if this Michigan pass defense is really all that, and I think they will be exposed as long as you block Aiden Hutchinson and David Ojabo. And Ojabo has gotten 4 of his 4.5 sacks the last 2 weeks against Nebraska and Wisconsin. So he needs to remain consistent. Hutchinson has kind of gotten a little bit quiet since Big Ten play. So the pass defense starts there. But I agree, Tom. I am going to say, oh, wait, I don't want to speak for you. Are you saying Ohio State as well for the secondary?
I'm going Ohio State there for the secondary. I mean, Brad Hawkins is another one of these guys who I think has been better this year than he has been in the past. He's just he's just been a guy for a few years, and he's been better than that this year. He's made some big plays. He had that big fumble, the strip and the fumble recovery against Nebraska that really changed that game. And he's been good. They haven't been getting like gashed over the top or anything. So he's been better, but I think, if you're having this conversation after the Oregon game or after the Tulsa game, I might even be tempted to give it to Michigan, but things have looked very, very different. And the Ohio State's made some personnel changes and some schematic changes where all of a sudden it looks like, this looks like an Ohio State team again. And generally Ohio State teams have looked better than Michigan teams over this, the span of this century. So that to me, tips it to Ohio State.
So let's move to special teams. Special teams, by the way, was the one area we sided with Michigan before the season. And a large portion of that was because Ohio State had an untested kicker. And, Noah Ruggles was part of the team when we did this, but this is also Noah Ruggles, a guy who lost his job at North Carolina. And, obviously Jesse Mirko never punted. Ohio State is not interested in returning the ball, so that's another downside for them. Whereas Michigan, they're interested in returning punts and kickoffs, and they also Jake Moody as an experienced kicker, and they had an experienced punter, so there was no reason not to go with Michigan. But now, Tom, I think you've seen Noah Ruggles is the only perfect kicker in the Big Ten. I'm sorry, I just said that for all of you Buckeye fans who are like, he's currently the only kicker who has made all of his field goal attempts with, you you've at least had to attempt a handful. And so he's done it. He's only 6 of 6. So it's not like he's Mike Nugent out there. But I think he is at this point solidified that. Jake Moody is 12 of 13 for Michigan. So, he's doing just fine and is as advertised once again. Punter Brad Robbins has been very good. So and Blake Corum has been returning the ball well. And I still say AJ Henning is going to bust a punt at some point this season, but there's no saying that Garrett Wilson isn't going to do the same. I think we both agree Emeka Egbuka is going to break one, and Jesse Mirko is only going to get better. The coverage for Ohio State has been very good. The coverage for Michigan has been up and down. So, Tom, before I give my answer, and I don't want to be wrong about it, maybe this is another push, but I think Ohio State has made it a lot closer than we were maybe thinking early on.
Yeah, I think this is a push, or it's a very slight lean to Michigan. I mean, 12 of 13 field goals is that is maybe more, maybe even better than Noah Ruggles being 6 of 6. Just you've done it a lot more. And Moody kicked a 52-yarder. Ruggles has not had to kick anything longer than 44. Brad Robbins is like a yard of average more than Jesse Mirko. And neither of them has had a touchback this year. I think if you wanted to give this to Michigan, you could give it to Michigan. If you wanted to call it a push, you could call it a push. I'm not really going to fight you on either of those. What's interesting to me is Michigan has kicked 13 field goals and punted 19 times. Ohio State has kicked 6 field goals and punted 14 times. So, that is 32 kicks for Michigan and 20 kicks for Ohio State in the same number of games, which kind of goes back to hey, when we say the Ohio State offense is better, this is what we're talking about. There's a pretty significant difference there. And let's see, they've Jake Booty has kicked 25 PATs and Noah Ruggles has kicked 37 PATs. There is a very clear trend in those numbers. So you want to give special teams to Michigan. I have no qualms with giving special teams to Michigan, but when we say the Ohio State offense is better all the way across the deck, that's what we mean.
Yeah, and just looking at the kickoff returns, Emeka Egbuka leading the Big Ten at 34.4 yards per return. Blake Corum second at 27.6. But yeah, we can go ahead and give this as a push for as I say, push for Michigan, because that's about as close to a win as we get. And
it's the 1992 Ohio State Michigan game all over again, but in reverse.
Plus, as we know at Michigan, you only need to win half of something to claim the entire thing. So, congratulations to Michigan on winning the linebackers and the special teams asterisk. So, Tom, anything else about this before we get out of here? Are we did we do it? Did we do a good service here to the people, to Michigan, to Ohio State? How do you feel?
Yeah, I mean, I think we accurately represented sort of the reality of the situation, and I'm sure Michigan fans are probably going, "That's ridiculous. How could you say?" And it's like, okay, well, if you want to tell me Michigan's better in a whole bunch of places, that's fine. You tell me how many points you're willing to give me for the Ohio State Michigan game, and we can come to some sort of an arrangement, because I'm still not I am simultaneously impressed with how Michigan has been this year, because they've been better than I expected them to be. They have significantly outplayed what I thought they would be this time of year. But also I feel like some of that is a function of who they've played and, what those teams have and have not been. I think that schedule looked a lot more daunting in August than it does now, looking back. And, you're going to find out a lot about Michigan in the next few weeks, because things get pretty hairy in the back half of the schedule for pretty much all these Big Ten East teams. Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan State, they're going to play a round robin coming up. Those 4 teams in the in the back half of the schedule. So, these arguments will all be decided on the field. So, Michigan is better than I expected them to be, absolutely, over the course of the summer. But I'm still really not entirely bought in. I really want to see it. I was pretty bought in after the first 3 games, and it's just you're starting to see the cracks in the dam form a little bit. So if this was going to go off the rails and Michigan is going to finish 9-3, like you can sort of see where the failure points might be coming.
You say off the rails at 9-3. I say best season in a while for Jim Harbaugh at 9-3.
Well, and those things can both be true. And then, I think if you asked Michigan fans before the year, if you were, you're going to go 9-3, how would you feel? And they would have been doing cartwheels.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, well, okay, what if I tell you you get killed at Penn State and, Ohio State wins by 14 points again, 20 points again? Like, is that okay? Is that like, sign me up for another year of that, please? Or, I don't know at what point that Jim Harbaugh conversation at the end of the year is just a bunch of people like Ward Manuel and other people like just sitting in a room and just staring at each other and going, well, like if you're 11-1, yeah, absolutely. If you're 7-5, like bye. There is going to be a point. There's a point somewhere in the middle there where everyone's just kind of staring at each other and going, well, is 9-3 with a somewhat, but not really competitive loss to Ohio State? Is that okay? Is that the standard now? And, I don't know what the answer is. And, maybe they'll go 10-2 and it'll be a close game against Ohio State and then they'll happily keep them. But I feel like that's coming up to what is not going to be a real easy, clean decision for them at the end of the year.
It's a lot like when we're on the road and it's about time for a meal and we can't decide where to stop off and nobody will make a decision and you just keep driving. And like eventually you just pull over and see, do they have to get their new coach out of a vending machine at a rest stop? Maybe. Maybe. Do they take credit cards now? So we'll see. I would think 9-3 would be great, except you're going to lose at Michigan State, at Penn State, and Ohio State. So now how do you feel about it?
Mm-hmm.
And, not so good, I'm guessing there. So I think that will do it for this edition of the first ever edition of the midseason tale of the tape between Ohio State and Michigan. We did a preseason. We did a midseason. I suppose we will do a postseason perhaps as well. We're probably going to be busy. But we'll see how this shakes out. We want to thank you all for tuning in. As always, you can always find us at youtube.com/BuckeyeScoop and also BuckeyeScoop.com as well. So thank you all, and we will talk to you later.